I used to work as a subcontractor for Google. Before you go, oh wow, Google! I wasn't coding the next Google.com. I was doing something more menial, taking a device, going around in circles at a shopping mall, and trying to map it out. But still, you worked in Google. Well, I also got sacked from Google. How do you get sacked for something as menial as that? I don't know. But I think one reason is because I spoke up. I might have lost my job, but I found my voice. Today, I want to share with you how we can find our voices again as social workers. Firstly, before we start, let me define what speaking up is. Speaking up isn't only limited to participating in rallies and demonstrations demanding civil rights. Speaking up is also about the small things, such as giving a voice to the voiceless, whether it be writing to a newspaper forum about their struggles or talking to a supervisor about their pains. Speaking up also means saying in a meeting that we don't think that this is the right way of doing things. Speaking up sometimes is not about how loud you say it, but what you actually say. But most importantly, speaking up is not just about the words. It's also about the actions. Why is this important? Over the years as a social worker, I've noticed that in more and more agencies, social workers are losing their voice. You might have thought otherwise. After all of us as social workers joined with noble ideas of speaking up for social justice and pursuing a hope of a better world. But yet we are slowly losing our voice. I believe this is due to two reasons. The first reason is because we are scared of others. Increasingly, more social work agencies are being funded by governments. And there is a complex relationship when a government gives a social agency money to carry out social services. This means that turning back to fight the hand that feeds us isn't necessarily the wisest thing to do. Secondly, I believe that it's because that we have grown increasingly disappointed with the change that we can engender in this world. I remember that as a young soldier, I was a sergeant of 6 bright and very, very resilient soldiers. However, they had graduated from the institute called ITE, or Institute of Technical Education. However, some of us have parodied it and said ITE instead stands for It's the End. Despite the qualities that they showed in the army, they were unable to get good jobs. Most of them now are working as Uber drivers, supermarket assistants, or cashiers. For years I spoke up about this to whoever would listen. But slowly I realized that this didn't change anything. Maybe today you feel the same. Despite speaking up for everything that concerns you, nothing ever seems to change. You wonder if there's any point. But there is. There is a point. Why? I believe we need to speak up because we owe it to our clients to pursue a better world for them. I remember that on placement I worked with a family with a daughter with mild learning disabilities. They were interested in having a placement that taught their child cooking. But this was very expensive. So my manager told me, can you manage expectations and ask them to look for something else? In my mind, I thought, well, is it really wrong for a family to expect the best for their child? Is it wrong for a family to expect the best for their child? Each and every day, clients share with us deep, profound stories of suffering. They courageously take that step forward to share. Yet how many of us can, with our hands on our hearts, say that we are courageously stepping up to speak up for them, for their concerns, for their suffering? When my manager said that, at that moment I had a choice. I could choose to stick to the status quo, or I could choose to speak up and fight for change. Each and every day, you have such a choice. You choose either to turn towards the suffering, taking steps to alleviate that, or we choose to turn away and not to do anything. Today, what will your choice be? Because we know the choices our clients have made. They have courageously stepped up and spoken up. But are we courageously stepping back and saying that I'm sorry, speaking up is too difficult for me? Today, I hope that this sharing can help us to unlock the potential of our voice, to see the unique storybook of experiences we share, and to use it for the good of our world. I believe it starts from the internal changes that we can make, and then the relationships that we need to adjust, and the organizational tweaks that we need to make. So starting from within us, I believe it starts by firing ourselves. Yes, you didn't hear me wrong. Fire yourself. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of us are unhappy because we end up working for the vision of the organization rather than for our personal vision. We end up complaining about how bad our bosses are, how bad the organization is, and how bad colleagues are. But when we fire ourselves from the organization, then we stop thinking about social work within the confines of the organization. We start thinking of social work within the communities we are in and the clients that we see. We no longer look at the organization as our boss. Very often, we see the organization as the conduit for our personal work. Let me explain this a bit more. So, for example, I used to think that I was a tool of the organization. That meant that the organization could use me however they wanted to. But when we start looking at the organization as a conduit of our work within the communities, within the clients, then we see how the organization becomes a tool for us to amplify the effectiveness of our social work with our clients. Therefore, firing yourself from social work agencies that you work at might sound crazy, but it works. Why? Because for the first time, you no longer fear the potential ramifications of speaking up because you are no longer part of the organization. I know this can be a bit conceptually hard, but let me try and break it down a bit more. By psychologically reframing yourself and not literally saying to your organization, I quit, you can fire yourself metaphorically from the organization. For example, recently I wrote to myself, Dear John, we have decided not to renew your services because of your desire to speak up, to advocate, and to strive for change. Your services are no longer required at our organization. Thank you. By doing that, I felt liberated. And I would encourage you to do that today too. By firing yourself from the organization, whether it is for real or whether it's a psychological reframe, it helps you to start thinking of yourself as working for your clients, for your community, rather than for your organization. That enables us and liberates us to speak up more for the clients and communities that we serve. So, let me give you the next step. Other than being willing to speak up, we need to be able to recognize that we have a voice. When we were young, we didn't care about what we sounded like. We would cry, we would scream for toys. We would even sing, Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Sorry for putting you through that, but you get the idea. We didn't care when we were young. But as we grew up, people started telling us, shh, silence is golden. Keep quiet in class. Pay attention. And then slowly, we start telling ourselves that our opinions don't really matter that much. We start keeping silent about the things that matter. For us to speak up, we need to first acknowledge that we have a voice to use. You have a voice. And today, I want you to do this simple exercise. Stop this video right here, right now. Take your phone and film yourself saying why you have joined social work. After you've done that, I want you to rewatch that video, no matter how many times you cringe. Just watch it, please. When you have done that, you realize that even though you might not like your voice very much, you at least have a voice, and that matters. I think I really do have to say that over the past 3 years, KMK has really been a very fun place for me. It's somewhere where I have looked forward to doing. Friday night, Manchester Piccadilly Station. All around me, people are rushing. People are rushing to buy a Starbucks latte for £3. The steam hisses. People are rushing to buy a Sainsbury meal deal. Ching! The queue rings. People are rushing to catch the train. Yet another train departs. Yet in the midst of all this busyness, I see an elderly man seated near the entrance. He's wearing a yellow vest, and in his hand are 2 copies of the big issue, sold by the homeless or those in vulnerable housing for £2.50. Whenever he senses someone walking past, he will raise his hand in hope. Yet the hopelessness of it all strikes me, because no one seems to see him. It is as if he were invisible, as if he had vanished into thin air. Do you see him now? Friends all around us, there is me. Yet so often we choose to turn away from me rather than facing it. Why? That evening, as I saw that man seated alone, cast away by society, ignored by people, I saw my own need for recognition, for acceptance, for love, reflected in his eyes. Friends, perhaps you turn away because you're scared of seeing your own need. How can we change this? It is by first recognizing their humanity and then their need. The need for recognition in the cleaner who cleans day after day for minimum wage. The need for acceptance in the student who sits alone because she is different. The need for love in the homeless person begging on the street. Any spell change, mate? Any spell change? So, what would it look like if today we walked up to them and said, "How are you? What is your name?" That evening, I walked up to the man and asked, "What is your name, sir?" He said, it. Stephen. My name is Stephen. Do you see me now? Thank you. So then, after knowing that we have a voice, we need to start using that voice. Here are 3 ways to use it. Firstly, stop looking at yourself. Start looking outwards. In all the Zoom videos that I used to be on, I realized I kept looking at my spotlighted video when I spoke. It was almost like I was speaking to myself all the time. I'll adjust my hair and look at whether I looked pretty enough. But honestly, stop looking at yourself. And I'm saying this for myself too. But metaphorically, stop looking at yourself. Stop thinking about what people will think about what you say, about what people will laugh at behind your back. Start looking at the clients and the communities that you can impact by speaking up. Secondly, we need to start listening to ourselves. When we are in meetings or when we see someone in pain, like I said before, we have a choice. And our choice can be to walk forward, step up and speak up, or we can walk backwards and choose to ignore it. Many times we choose to take a step back because we are worried about what people will think. But our conscience is there telling us that this is not right. Maybe I should speak up. In Professor Steve Peters' book, The Chimp Paradox, he talks about how all of us have a little chimp, as you can see here, within us. This chimp likes to jump around, is very irrational, and very emotional. It cares only about its own face, how it looks. Sometimes we need to learn to ignore our chimp and start listening to our human. Our human. So today, stop looking at yourself and start to listen to yourself. Relationally, we need to perhaps spend less time in teams. Well, I know what you're saying. You might be saying, that is crazy, John. Are you ignoring what serious case reviews say about the importance of teamwork? Are you ignoring the purpose and benefit of collaboration? No. And yes. There is much benefit to collaboration and teamwork. But that becomes a problem when we use that as the primary way of working. When we pride collaboration over everything else. In Susan Cain's beautiful book, Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, she shares about how our world has slowly moved to extolling extroverts over introverts. But this is dangerous because when we do that, that is the danger of herd mentality. That means that when everyone else around us is nodding, we end up nodding because that is what everyone else thinks. And then there is the halo effect, described by Brené Brown in her book, Dare to Lead. It's when we pride the opinions of a more esteemed member, more respected member, over our own. We know this experience. When our boss says an idea, we see everyone else nodding, and then we start nodding, even though it might not be good. So, when I ask you to start working less in teams, it is not about pulling yourself and isolating yourself from the teams that are around you, but it's about being more conscious about how you spend time within teams. And why is this important? Because when we keep spending time in teams, our voices stop getting used for the times that they really matter. Our voices get drowned out by the cacophony of voices that are around us. Over time, we no longer trust our own voice, but we trust the voices of everyone around us. And that is dangerous. Today, taking a step back from teams means a few things. Firstly, start skipping team meetings. I used to remember that when I went for a meeting, someone once asked me, hey, do you have a pen and paper, please? And then I thought to myself, why are you here if you don't even have pen and paper? You might have been in meetings like that before, where nobody's prepared and you come out dazed, confused, and wondering what just happened. Well, today, before accepting a meeting invitation, I want you to think, what value can I bring to this meeting and what value can I leave behind? So what value can I bring and what value can I take away and leave in the meeting? That helps us to be more conscious of the times we are spending in meetings. The truth is that unlocking the power of our voices sometimes hurts others. Where we need to draw boundaries and tell people that this is okay and this is not. When we need to break bad news, that hurts others. But it can also hurt us. Because putting our views out there is very scary. In closing, I want to share a story. In my last session with my therapist in England, I was seated with her and she asked me a question. John, what would you do in the last 30 seconds of your life. I bit my lip and I looked around her room for inspiration. The flowers on the window, the apples on the table, the books on the shelves. She gently prods me. John, you have 10 seconds left. I look at her and I say, I will call my mom and I'll tell her how much I love her. Finding our voices is about recognizing that we have a voice and using it. But it also means turning down the cacophony of voices around us. But most importantly, it's about not leaving the words within us unsaid. Thank you.